Cultured swines? Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay.
So I went to the cinema the other day to see Detective Pikachu and I liked it okay. Yeah, it wasn't great, but it was a fun, charming enough time, and considering some of what this genre has had to offer beforehand,
it's Mario and Luigi Mario.
I do understand why people think it's the first good video game movie. But not only do I think that there has been a good video game movie before, I think there's one that succeeds in an adaptation of its series even better than Detective Pikachu. That film is Professor Layton and the Eternal Diva, and here's why I think it's still the best video game movie. Okay, so I've briefly mentioned this in the past, but for those of you that don't know, I adore the Professor Layton series. My love for entertainment has taken me to many different sources of inspiration, but it can all be traced back to the summer's day in 2011 when I sat down and began playing Pandora's Box for the first time. This series follows archaeologist Herschel Layton and his young, enthusiastic apprentice Luke Triton as they are called upon to crack numerous mysteries. You explore a wide array of locations, talk to the townsfolk, and solve a myriad of different puzzles and brain teasers. Through the wonderful stories, brilliantly quirky characters, and the addictive puzzles, I became very attached to these games for a couple of years, so much so that the finale to this series, The Azran Legacy, features the only time I have ever cried at a video game, and that was at the credits because I knew it was the end of the series. Now, of course, the franchise did return with Lady Layton, but I never really got into that one, because the original struck such a big chord with me that the characters are basically irreplaceable. In short, this is one of my favourite game series of all time, so naturally I've been familiar with the movie for many years and have watched it many times. So you could make the argument that I'm already biased towards it when calling it a good video game movie, but is that necessarily a bad thing? Well, I'm skipping ahead a bit, so let's go back a step and look at the movie properly. Released and taking place during the prequel trilogy, the Eternal Diva sees the Professor receive a letter, which he does in every game, from Janice Quatlane, one of his old students who has gone on to become a famous opera singer. She is confused about a young girl who claims to be a recently deceased friend, so she invites the Professor and Luke to see her latest performance to presumably discuss the matter later. They never get the opportunity to, however, when the entire audience is thrust into a dangerous game where the winner receives eternal life whilst everyone else loses theirs. Layton, Luke and Janice have no other choice but to play along, but as the game continues, our leads find themselves uncovering the real truth behind the whole facade. So one of the first things to note about the story when compared to other video game movies is that it isn't its own separate thing, nor is it adapting one of the already present plot lines. It is very much an addition to the series. In fact, certain things that happen towards the end of the film are brought up again in the games that followed, which doesn't just make this a cool little thing for Professor Layton fans, it's as much a part of the franchise as the games are, which isn't something you normally get with other video game adaptations. And another thing you don't normally get with other video game adaptations is great and faithful presentation, which this excels at. Something that annoys me about other video game movies is their unnecessary need to make it live action, already creating a noticeable disconnect with its series. Eternal Diva, on the other hand, simply feels like an extended cutscene from one of the games, featuring the same quality of artistry and music, which has always been outstanding. I love the art style, with vivid character designs and gorgeous backgrounds filling every frame. There's even a few fun Easter eggs in the background of certain scenes. At times, some of the brief uses of CG can be a little distracting, but it's easy enough to look past and the hand-drawn characters don't clash with it too badly. And it was a good call on the writer's part to have a lot of the story be centered on the score, as this is some of my favourite music ever. The Professor Layton series has always featured great soundtracks, but here we have nothing but glorious orchestration after glorious orchestration that sweeps me away every single time I listen to it. And speaking of that story, I was struck by how well it tells a classic Layton narrative whilst only being able to work as a movie when I rewatched the film for this video. The games are very calmly paced, allowing you to easily deviate from the main plot to explore your surroundings and find additional puzzles to solve. But the characters are given very few breaks from the action here, which works well in keeping the movie engaging and keeping it feeling like an actual film. And yet, it still manages to retain what made the series so great in the first place, most notably in how the puzzles are fit into this game for eternal life. They don't feel shoehorned in, and some of the solutions are actually really clever, and it all culminates into a big mystery that has everything you could want from a Professor Layton story. Memorable and interesting characters, some powerful emotional beats, and a surprising end twist. Yeah, the Layton series is pretty infamous for its ludicrous end reveals, but this features one of the less silly ones, which actually has a strange amount in common with Get Out's big twist, come to think of it. Is Jordan Peele secretly a Professor Layton fan? Anyway, it's a very exciting adventure that successfully translates this series into movie form, as well as being able to hold its own as a very solid film in general. After the opening, which reintroduces the world to the audience, it's easy to forget that this is based off a video game and just enjoy the ride on its own merits. But ultimately, I love this film because it is a part of the franchise, and outside of everything I've already discussed, the main thing that this does better than any other video game movie is capturing the heart of the series. Detective Pikachu did a good job of bringing its world to life on the big screen. It mostly got the feel down, but it ultimately lacked the spirit of the source material. The battle scenes didn't have the same giddy, light-hearted excitement that the games have, and I left having liked it as a fun movie that left out the magic of the series. Alternatively, I really enjoyed the Tomb Raider movie with Angelina Jolie as a fun adventure that was silly and self-aware. But even though I've never played the games, I didn't get the feeling that it showed what made the games popular in the first place. I liked it as a campy blockbuster, but it didn't fully inspire me to give one of the games a go. Then you have all of the universally hated video game films that seem to completely miss what made these games so beloved, and oftentimes it feels like these iconic characters were slapped on to increase ticket sales. More often than not, they're completely separate entities from the franchises that they're based off. Which brings me back to Professor Layton. Not only is it a faithful adaptation that isn't just a throwaway novelty, but it feels as special as the games. Coming back to this film after a long break from thinking about the series or listening to the soundtrack and hearing the music in those first few seconds is a downright magical experience, and I'm instantly taken back to the excitement I felt when I first fell in love with the series, upon which the film builds upon into its own joyous package. It's not just that it's a great movie that's on the same level as the games, but it evokes the spirit of the whole franchise perfectly. Video game movies shouldn't be about seeing your favourite games outside of the actual games. They should be reminders as to what made those titles special in the first place, so that even when you haven't played them in a long time, you can pop in the film to re-experience the joy that the game or series provided in one sitting. Professor Layton and the Eternal Diva is the only movie to realise the potential magic of these adaptations, which is why I still consider it to be the best video game movie ever made. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed my return to YouTube after another pretty lengthy hiatus. I've been struggling to find inspiration for video making this year, and this was the product of me getting my spark back for long enough to create something. So hopefully I can keep this up and bring you some new videos in the near future. But whenever that may be, I'll see you all then. Goodbye!